Forget the clean, uniform look you've seen in photo books. On Eastern Front airfields, boots were a medical decision. Leather that turned rigid, soles that skated on ice, socks that stayed wet for days. Regulations said Luftwaffe ground crews should look consistent and draw supplies through proper channels. Winter didn't negotiate. Men traded, bought, captured, and improvised because an engine can wait, but frostbite doesn't. These are the 7 banned boots Luftwaffe ground crews used on the Eastern Front. Number 7. Soviet felt valenki. Captured comfort against severe cold. Luftwaffe ground crews were supposed to wear standard-issue service footwear leather marching boots with hobnails kept clean, maintained, and uniform. Officially, enemy equipment was discouraged, and anything that broke uniformity could invite a lecture, a report, or a quiet confiscation. The paperwork assumed a functioning supply system and a winter that behaved. In the winter of 1941-43, felt valenki didn't care about regulations. They were thick, clumsy, and ugly by German standards. They were also warm. On airfields in dispersal areas around the Leningrad sector, men working outside for hours, fuel handlers, armorers, fitters pulled captured valenki over dry foot traps or socks and kept working. Accounts tied to Luftwaffe field formations in the region, including elements associated with the 6th Luftwaffenfeld Division during operations near Leningrad, describe valenki as a practical frostbite countermeasure when standard leather simply bled heat. Sometimes it worked exactly as intended: warmer feet, fewer cold injuries, more time on task. But felt soaked through in slush, dried slowly, and replacements weren't in German channels. Once the captured stocks were gone, you were back to cold leather or to taking bigger risks to find more. Number 6. German Army marching boots. The regulated option that wasn't issued. Luftwaffe ground crews had their own clothing tables, and the expectation was clear. You wore what the Luftwaffe issued you, and you drew replacements through Luftwaffe supply. Even when soldiers were operating under field division structures, mixing kit across branches was officially frowned on because it wrecked accountability. Someone had to explain where the boots came from. Near Stalingrad in 1942, units tied to the 3 Luftwaffenfeld Division and attached airfield personnel operated in conditions that punished lightweight footwear. The solution wasn't a new directive. It was barter. Ground crews traded cigarettes, spare parts, even favors small maintenance jobs for heavier marching boots that held up better under hard marching and rough airfield work. They weren't exotic. They were just more durable, and sometimes a better fit for the mud and frozen ruts around revetments and vehicle tracks. The upside was immediate. Fewer blown seams, fewer soaked feet, and a sense that someone had solved a real problem. The downside showed up later. Supply clerks couldn't reconcile losses. Replacements didn't match. And if an inspection team wanted to make an example, unauthorized exchanges were an easy target even when the boots kept a mechanic on his feet. Number 5. Privately purchased ski boots. Better grip than regulation could offer. Luftwaffe rules disliked private purchases for a reason. Uniformity mattered, but so did resentment. If one man could buy better gear, another couldn't. Officially, you wore issued boots, you maintained them, and you didn't create a 2-tier system on the same flight line. That was the theory, written far from frozen concrete. Around airfields supporting Luftwaffe 4 during the winter of 1941-42, the ground problem wasn't only cold. It was traction. Packed snow and glazed ice turned refueling points and servicing areas into injury factories. Men who could find them through local shops, black markets, or contacts in rear areas bought ski boots. Thicker soles, better bite, a design made for sliding and stopping, not parade ground marching. Some wore them only while working and switched back when an officer was nearby. Others didn't bother hiding it, because a broken arm from a fall was a worse kind of visibility. In the best cases, ski boots reduced slips and kept specialists functional during peak sortie tempos. In the worst, higher command treated the boots as indiscipline, confiscated them, or punished the wearer, leaving the same IC problem unsolved, just with colder feet and worse morale. Number 4. Fur-lined mukluks. A warm contraband choice. The Luftwaffe wanted leather boots. Predictable appearance, predictable maintenance, predictable supply. Fur and soft uppers were viewed as irregular, hard to repair to standard, and too easy to turn into a personal fashion statement. On paper, warmth was managed by socks and discipline, not by reinventing the boot. On northern airstrips in 1942-43, warmth became the only metric that mattered. At places like Pskov, where units rotated through exposed servicing areas and long periods of standing watch or waiting on aircraft, fur-lined mukluks appeared, some acquired through local sources, some improvised from available materials, borrowing ideas from cold-weather civilian designs. They were quiet and warm. They also felt wrong to anyone raised on stiff leather and hobnails. But a mechanic with numb feet can't feel a dropped bolt, and he can't judge torque the same way. When mukluks worked, they bought hours of usable time in the cold and reduced cold injuries during routine tasks. When they failed, it was usually durability. Uppers tore, seams opened, and soles separated on rough ground. Then you were repairing your boots at night using wire, cord, or whatever adhesive existed because the supply system didn't recognize them as real equipment. If you had to stand on an icy dispersal strip for 6 hours, would you pick regulation leather or soft warmth that might fall apart? Before we move on, what would you optimize for on a frozen airfield? Insulation, traction, or durability? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you want WW2 history without the uniform and hero myths, subscribe. The next entries get even more improvised and more risky. Number 3. Improvised overshoes, galoshes. Waterproofing that trapped its own damage. Regulations assumed your boot itself was the waterproof layer. Leather was to be greased, seams maintained, and soles repaired through unit channels. Overshoes were not a Luftwaffe look, and anything rubberized was treated as non-standard, hard to issue, hard to size, easy to acquire, without paperwork. On the Eastern Front, slush was the enemy that didn't announce itself. Snow melted under engines, vehicles, and foot traffic, then refroze into rutted ice. Ground crews started pulling improvised overshoes over their boots. Civilian galoshes from nearby towns, cut down rubber from vehicle inner tubes, even layered canvas wraps tied off with cord. The goal was simple: keep water out long enough to finish a shift. Men would stash them near revetments, slip them on for fueling or de-icing work, then hide them again before a walk past an office. Sometimes it did exactly what it promised: dry feet, fewer trench foot cases, longer time outside. But rubber also trapped sweat. Add cold, and you got damp insulation with nowhere to go. A few hours later, toes went numb anyway, and the skin damage started quietly. Number 2. Insulated foot trap combinations. The band fix that lived inside the boot. The official answer to cold feet was orderly, standard socks, proper sizing, and regular changes. German issue assumed you could dry things. It also assumed the boot was the main event, and what you wore inside it was secondary, kept within regulation and kept predictable. On airfields, predictable died first. Men began copying what worked locally. Foot trap strips of cloth folded tight were layered under socks, or swapped in when socks stayed wet. Some crews added newspaper for dead air insulation, or wrapped the foot in fabric cut from worn shirts, then finished with a thin sock to reduce friction. The method mattered. Too loose and you got blisters. Too tight and circulation dropped, exactly when you needed it most. Ground crewmen learned to rewrap fast, hands stiff, often by feel. The success case was practical. Warmer feet in the same boots, less skin breakdown, fewer days lost. The failure case was ugly. Bad wraps caused pressure sores, and once a blister opened in freezing conditions, infection and frostbite became partners. A clever fix could turn into a medical evacuation. Number 1. Soviet sapogi, jack boots. The enemy boot that solved a German problem. Luftwaffe dress rules wanted you in Luftwaffe footwear, period. Captured items were discouraged, and tall Soviet boots looked especially wrong in a German unit. The sapogi also didn't fit German maintenance habits. Different leather, different construction, and repairs that didn't match what Luftwaffe cobblers were set up to do. On the ground, sapogi made sense. They were high enough to block snow from pouring in. They shed slush better than low boots with gaiters that slipped. And they had room for thick socks, foot traps, even improvised insulation. Ground crewmen around forward strips learned fast that a boot you could pull on quickly mattered when an aircraft diverted in, damaged, and needed hands immediately. Sapogi were often taken from battlefield stocks, traded from army units, or bought through the same grain networks that moved fuel and food. When it worked, it was simple: drier legs, warmer feet, fewer stops to fix laces or gaiters, more usable hours outside. When it failed publicly: inspections, confiscations, and the risk of being forced back into whatever your official stores actually held. Look at the pattern. Doctrine tried to standardize bodies, because standardization is how big organizations function. Winter didn't care. Men adjusted one layer at a time: captured boots, private purchases, rubber wraps, footcloth tricks, until survival and compliance stopped lining up. If you want World War II history without simplification or mythology, subscribe. We stay close to what people used, what they risked, and what it cost them, especially in the small decisions that never make the victory parades.